Easton Cowan shines in Saginaw. Marner on the trading block. And are the Leafs close to naming the rest of Craig Berube's coaching staff? We'll discuss all of this and more on today's edition of the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Leafs podcast, a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast hosted by myself, Mike DiStefano, and my co-host, Dave Morassutti. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Gotta tell you, Dave, I might use the Game Time app. I'm considering getting my ass down to Saginaw this weekend to see that Memorial Cup final because I want to put these peepers on our guy, Easton Cowan, who continues to just dominate at the junior hockey level. Really put the team on his back late in the game, scored the game-winning goal with less than 2 minutes to go, gives London the victory over Saginaw, books their ticket into the OHL Memorial Cup final. Dude, I can't recall the last time we've seen a Maple Leafs prospect like really get you excited about stuff like this. It's been a long while.
Yeah, I mean, there's not like I thought. I was looking back to maybe when Matthew Nyes was in the Frozen Four, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's not to this level because like Easton Cowan is by far and away the like blowing the rest of the talent out of the water. Like I know he got off a bit of a slow start in the tournament, but he came up huge. Like this was a huge game for London, right? Like Saginaw, there's so much pressure on them to be in that final, to be the team like as the host team, right? There's so much pressure when you're the host team of the Memorial Cup. And yeah, it's not just how he did it too, is the swagger in his play, right? Especially the celebrations, both the goals.
Oh yeah, nice little heartbreak on the game winner.
Yeah, I did appreciate that, and again, it's a level of just he says he likes the big stage. Is his demeanor, I think, kind of shows that.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. And look, the Leafs need guys who perform like that on the big stage because the ones that are here right now aren't seeming to be those types of guys. Now, granted, I suppose, they shined at one point on the big stage, like Mitch Marner when he was in junior. He was a stud, MVP, rolled through the playoffs, won Memorial Cup. So, Mitch Marner has done a lot of the similar things that Easton Cowan has done. And I guess Marner is that like the last prospect that you were really excited about. I guess that is kind of how far back you kind of have to go. Like Robertson in a way, kind of, Nyes, he wasn't like the top guy out there just because, Logan Cooley was on his team, Brock Faber was on his team. Like there's just a bunch of other dudes who you were like, okay, there's some really talented players. But yeah, like Cowan, like the guy's just dominating, like from pillar to post, right from the start of the season all the way through. And then tonight, London had 4 goals. He was part of 3 of them, including the game winner, netted the empty netter as well, assisted on the first goal that they had scored. Really nice play he made to set up that goal. So he's just doing it all. And like, we already know that he's just as good, if not better, on the defensive end than he is offensively. And, that's saying something when we're talking about a guy in a Memorial Cup tournament game here, 3-point night. And it's like, yeah, but you should see his defensive game. Like the guy's unbelievable. So really, really cool to see a Maple Leafs prospect torching the tournament here. It really does get you excited about what he potentially could bring to this Maple Leafs team next season. So what's next for them? I guess so. London, they get the bye with the win tonight against Saginaw. They get the bye into the final on June 2nd, and they'll play the winner of Saginaw and Moose Jaw, who will play in the semifinal. And then, winner from that game moves on to play for the Memorial Cup Championship on June 2nd. Speaking of championships, the PWHL championship was awarded today. The Walter Cup was awarded. Congratulations to Minnesota for being the first ever PWHL champions. Taylor Heisey, the captain of the squad, Taylor Heisey named MVP. Kendall Coyne Schofield, the captain of the squad, raising the trophy. I don't know if you had a chance to watch. It kind of coincided with not only the Oilers and Dallas game, but also obviously coincided with the game in what just happened there. Oh, nothing. We're good. Also coincided with the OHL game, or the Memorial Cup game rather. But did you get a chance to watch the ceremony by chance for the PWHL? Boy, was it awfully reminiscent of the Stanley Cup ceremony.
Yeah, there was had a bit of that feeling to it. And
they literally had like people in Hall of Fame jackets who had like white gloves, who took a cup out of a case and carried it and like put it on a podium, like exactly like we see happen in the Stanley Cup playoff and the Stanley Cup final. I thought it was quite humorous. I'm also a big fan of the trophy. I think they did a really good job on the trophy. It's a cup, so it's something that could be drank out of. We all know the best trophies are ones that you can drink out of.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah.
It's an incredible. I remember when they first announced like the Walter Cup, and I was like, Walter Cup. Like I didn't understand it first, and I read more into like the person that it's named after and all those things, and then to actually see it, it's so cool. Like it's not the Stanley Cup. Like the Stanley Cup's iconic, but yeah, I like the uniqueness of it, right? Like the way it kind of connects, like the cup. At first, I was trying to figure out, is it a cup? Is it a bowl? Like what exactly? Like what's like the kind of the shape of it?
Yeah,
but I mean, the one thing
you can drink out of it. Who cares?
Of course. The first thing I said too was, "Man, that is shiny."
Oh yeah. Well, I think it was sponsored by like Tiffany's,
Yeah.
Tiffany and Co. Kind of designed it, I suppose. So, which makes sense. I think that makes total sense. It's a really good sponsor for that. So, I thought they did a really good job of it. And hats off to the PWHL. It's very successful first season now in the books. Unfortunately, our Lady Leafs, the Toronto team, was unable to win a championship in their first year and ran into some injury troubles come playoff time. But we'll see what they can get up to next year. Hopefully they can bring a championship
what the team name is going to be. What's the team name?
Well, that too.
I think those are going to come up.
Yeah, they did announce that they for sure will be picking some team names, and there's stuff that's trademarked, and they're going to be unveiling the new jerseys with the nicknames and the logos and all that. So that's all going to be unveiled for next season, which I think it's November start. I want to say November start. They're hoping for. I think that was the target start date, because it was going to be earlier than what they did this year for sure. This is only like a half season. They kind of got going halfway through the year.
But like January, right?
Yeah. But I think they want to start a little bit earlier, and that's kind of going to be their season basically.
It makes more sense, right? Because you don't, and no offense to the PWHL, you don't want to be caught also battling with the Stanley Cup playoff game, right? For viewers, for a lot of things, even like arenas and stuff like that as well.
You still are. I mean, the PWHL playoffs go right through. I mean, they mirror the seasons mirror each other, and that's going to happen. That's hockey season. It's pretty weird to be playing hockey in the summer. So they're going to mirror each other. It is what it is, I guess. But regardless, year one was a success, and I'm sure year two they'll continue to ascend, and we'll see some more improvements to the game, improvements to the league. But I think you got to take your hat off. It was all kind of whipped together pretty quickly. And I think that they did an excellent job. And just, the fact that the championship went down to 5 games, went to a best of 5. And then Minnesota ended up coming up victorious. I think Kendall Coyne Schofield being the first captain to win. Like she's, a face of the league. Taylor Heisey was the number 1 overall pick in the first draft. Now a champion. It just, a lot of it made sense for Minnesota to win. So congrats to them. Congratulations to all of those who were part of the PWHL success in year number 1. On the other side, Dave, a couple of Leaf notes that we got to get to. One, could the Leafs be rounding out their staff pretty soon? Still waiting to hear who Craig Berube wants as his assistants. There's a couple of names that are out there and one new name that has entered the conversation. We'll get to that, and we'll get to Mitch Marner debuting at number 1 on Frank Seravalli's offseason trade bait board. What does that mean? What does he know that we don't, Dave? We'll get into all of that and more on today's edition of the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time makes getting NHL Finals tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to puck drop. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from receipt, and the lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NHL tickets. You've got those last-minute deals where you can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, comedy, events, theater events, concerts, whatever. They've got flash deals, they've got zone deals, they've got all-in pricing and the lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying NHL Finals tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. Mike DiStefano and Dave Morassutti with you. We are your hosts here at Locked On Leafs, a daily Maple Leaf centric podcast, which you can find wherever you download your podcast from audio-wise. And you can also find us up on YouTube 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. So make sure you are subscribed in order to get that daily dose of Maple Leafs content. And just a reminder, doing another giveaway at 10,000 subscribers. When we hit 10K, we'll be giving away another Maple Leafs jersey. So the quicker we get there, the quicker one of you lucky listeners can get yourselves a jersey. So if you haven't yet, and a large majority of the listeners have not subscribed, make sure you do so and be a friend, tell a friend about the Locked On Leafs podcast. So let's get into a couple of leafy items here, Dave. You want to start with Mitch Marner, or you want to start with the coaching search, I suppose?
Let's do the coaching search first.
All right, let's start with the coach. So Craig Berube's now been the head coach of this team for a couple of weeks now, and we're still kind of waiting to hear what happens with the staff. No one has technically been relieved of their duties as of yet. The holdovers that were here and in place with Sheldon Keefe. That being said, Manny Malhotra did mutually part ways with the team, and Dart, and he's now the head coach of Vancouver's farm team out in Abbotsford. But outside of that, no real updates on what's happening with Dean Chenoweth or what's happening with Mike Van Ryn, or for that matter, we also don't know technically what's happening with Guy Boucher. Now, we all have our opinions and we have our thoughts on what might happen, but we are not quite sure because no one's been let go and no one has been named to Berube's staff quite yet. That being said, Dave, it looks like we might be getting close to hearing who they could be nearing an agreement with to welcome onto Craig Berube's staff. And it sounds like one new entrant has become available as of a couple of days ago. And there's an obvious link between these two, and that's Mike Yeo from the Vancouver Canucks, formerly the head coach of the St. Louis Blues. The same St. Louis Blues that Craig Berube served under, and then later took Mike Yeo's job when he got relieved of his duties the same year the Blues went on to win the Stanley Cup. So there's obviously a clear connection between Berube and between Mike Yeo from their days together in St. Louis. So what's the likelihood you think that Mike Yeo eventually is named as one of the new assistants here in Toronto?
I think there's probably likely. I mean, you don't give up a chance to coach the Canucks unless there's something. Sometimes, obviously, there's like family related stuff. He's all the way out on the West Coast. He might want to come closer to home.
Well, that was what was reported, to be
Yeah.
fair. The report did come out that he rejected a 1-year extension from Vancouver to explore an opportunity closer to home. He is a Toronto-born native, right? So I don't know if that's where he lives or where he summers, but he was born here. He's got a family here, I would assume. So if that's the case, that's another kind of link to Toronto. Some saying maybe Ottawa, right? Just with, Travis Green. Could Mike Yeo end up on Travis Green's staff? That's another kind of link that people are making. But I think Toronto makes just a bit more sense with the history with Berube and Mike Yeo.
Be interesting, right? The guy that took over in your position, the team you're coaching for, and went all the way to the Cup final. Now you're going to be working under him, technically with that new staff. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure I was talking to some buddies about this, and they both brought up like, "Oh, you mean the Mike Yeo that had a temper tantrum during practice and threw a stick like 15 feet into the stands?" Like, yep, that Mike Yeo.
That's the one. That would be the one.
We did have a Mark Savard tweet citing also. He replied to, because I think Kevin Bieksa was crediting Wyatt Johnson's stick tape job, and we know Mark Savard can't resist a discussion about stick tape. And he's like, "Yep, I taught Wyatt that one."
Hey, there you go. So what are you saying? If Marky Savard,
he still has the funny thing is he still has the Calgary Flames logo on his X profile. Like, time to update that one, Mark.
Yeah, strip that one. You don't have to necessarily put a Leaf logo up there quite yet, but you might want to take your former employers off there. But yeah, like it seems like I think there's if I had to hazard a guess of what this staff could look like, I think we're probably zeroing in on Mark Savard. I believe will end up coming over to Toronto staff. It's a similar situation to Mike Yeo, where it's like he gave up an opportunity somewhere else to come home, to come eastward. And I think that makes a lot of sense. He'll run the forward bench and he'll run the power play. He was on Berube's staff at one point in St. Louis, so there's that link there. I think you look at Mike Van Ryn maybe as the lone holdover, somebody who also worked on Craig Berube's staff once upon a time. He could work your defense. And then you bring in Mike Yeo, who, is a really good coach when it comes to special teams and when it comes to penalty kill. Those were kind of the duties that he had in Vancouver, and he kind of transformed that penalty kill, over the course of the past season that they just had. So you can look at those three as kind of the likely assistants that we could see be named here in the not so distant future for Craig Berube. I think I wouldn't be surprised if we hear, get a press release in the next week or so that Mike Yeo and Mark Savard have been hired as assistants to Craig Berube's staff. Mike Van Ryn will be retained and also work under Craig Berube. And we would like to thank Dean Chenoweth and Guy Boucher for their time here in Toronto, but we will be mutually parting ways. I won't be shocked at all if that's kind of the press release that we get here in the next week or maybe even sooner.
Yeah, and I think, again, they're going to make they're going to announce the coaching staff all together. They're not just like, all right, we've hired Mark Savard. Oh, we've hired. This is all going to be done when it's all finalized. A lot of how football teams do their coaching staff, they're not going to waste time doing a bunch of different press releases when they can just do it all in one. So it takes a little bit of time to get all the pieces to fall into place.
But I think we're close. Because at this point, I mean, Savard and Yeo, the hurdle was, that they were employed by other teams. That's no longer the case. So that's no longer a hurdle for the Maple Leafs. So they can go ahead, sign both of those guys and just retain Mike Van Ryn and then go from there. Try and put together the roster after that. Once you get the staff in place, Now you put together the roster that you think can execute what the staff wants to do. And ultimately, that's the game plan for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Obviously, as they have, they're still going to have high expectations going forward. It's a new coach, but it's not like you're resetting the clock here. The window is still shrinking for Toronto to win in like this Matthews, Marner, Nylander, Tavares era. So, got to get to it. Got to name your coach and then kind of get to putting the rest of the team together. That is what's next. Does it include Mitch Marner, though? That's the big question. Does next year's Maple Leafs roster include Mitchell Marner? Well, he did debut at number 1 on Frank Saravalli's off-season trade bait board. We'll discuss what that could mean on the other side. You're listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Welcome back to the Locked On Leafs podcast. Mike DiStefano and Dave Morassutti with you. I was just kind of perusing Twitter today, and I saw a really fun article. The type of articles that does catch my eye. You could call it clickbait. You call it whatever you want. But I am definitely taking that bait whenever I see I guess no pun intended, but a trade bait board. I am definitely clicking on that article, and one did come through my timeline today on Twitter or X or whatever from Frank Saravalli from Daily Faceoff as he debuted his top 20 trade bait board today. And coming in at number 1 is Maple Leafs' very own Mitch Marner. What was your reaction when you saw that list and when you saw that name at the top of it?
Yeah, it was obviously not surprising because when you're looking at potential players who could be available, it looks like Mitch Marner will take the top of the list of almost every trade bait board. Even if it's not like a for sure he gets moved, if there's even a little inkling that he is available, every single person is going to put him at the top of the list. So it shouldn't surprise anyone. And honestly, I'm guaranteeing as somebody who works for a sports media website is really enjoying the fact that they do have a Mitch Marner type player that they can put on a trade bait board. Because I don't know if you've looked at trade bait boards in the trade bait boards. Sorry to say that 5 times fast.
Trade bait board. Not that difficult. Continue.
Such a jerk. But like you look at these boards the last few years, and it's like, really, that's the best we can do. Like, and look, you look at the board that Saravalli has. It's actually like you go through the first few names, and you're like, all right, this is actually pretty solid. And then you scroll down more, and you're like, yeah. That's a little more what we're used to. But like the first few names,
big names, and then you get to like Arthur Kaliev, and then it just kind of continues to go down from there. So yeah, we're showing it here on YouTube what the trade bait board looks like, and yes, Mitch Marner is the number 1 player, yes, that's not going to shock anybody. But then Linus Ullmark comes in as the number 2 on the trade bait board. Jacob Chychrun, also not a big surprise. Lots of chatter of both of those 2 players potentially getting dealt to the deadline. Martin Necas is a very interesting one to get popped up here. He's a pending RFA, but did you hear like the shots that Don Waddell took about Necas on his way out, and the comments that Necas, his father, I guess, was making about how he should have been more of a factor into the lineup and playing on the top power play? And it was like some GTHL stuff that was going on out in Carolina, apparently. So seeing his name pop up now in the top 5 is kind of interesting, in my opinion.
Oh, it's always fun when fathers get involved in their sons playing. It is very interesting.
Well, we wouldn't know anything about that here in Toronto, right?
No, not at all.
No. I don't know the single name of a single father of any of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Not one. not one.
No.
Nick Ehlers comes in at number 5, but I think like after this, it really does start to die down. I think like Saros, I think is kind of next, and then you get
There he is.
pretty quick Arthur Kaliev. It's like, okay, you ran out of some solid names.
How is Arthur Kaliev ahead of Philip Gustafson though? Can we?
Well, because I think when you look at who's more likely to be dealt, I would say Kaliev. I mean, he's a guy who, like, former first-round pick, and he's somebody who you look at and you say to yourself, he needs a change of scenery, So I think that's just everyone knows that he's going to get dealt this summer because it's not working. He's been buried playing a fourth-line role, and he's not really a guy who can play on the fourth line. He's more of a top-6 sniper, so it's like he needs to just go somewhere else. So I'm assuming that one is more of a likelihood as opposed to like this player is better than this player. But there was that report a couple weeks ago about Philip Gustafson potentially being available or being shopped even by Minnesota. Him and Marco Rossi, who did not make the top 20 board, I might add.
Yeah, I guess Frank isn't as convinced that Marco Rossi's up there because, like, if you're trying to shed salary,
I don't know why. Why are you moving Marco Rossi?
I know, like that's my thing, right? Like, out of all guys you want to move, he's actually probably your best player to keep around because he's affordable and he's good.
Yes.
Generally, you don't trade those guys away unless you want something significant in return, but you're also dealing with $15 million in dead cap.
Yes. Yeah. So they're not looking for something significant in return. They're looking for cap space in return. In total, though, there were 5 goaltenders on Frank Seravalli's trade bait board. I know we spoke yesterday. If you missed it, yesterday's show, we kind of discussed how goaltending or trading for a goaltender is probably the most likely scenario for the Maple Leafs if they're going to improve in net this summer. And there are 5 goalies who are up there for Frank Seravalli on the trade bait board. He's got UC Saros, he's got Jacob Markstrom, he's got Philip Gustafson, Linus Ullmark, and then Elvis Merzlikins was another goaltender who was up on that list. Anybody tickle your fancy here, Dave?
I mean, the reason why I've kind of liked the Gustafson idea is because he's probably going to come at a lower price than what a UC Saros. Obviously, UC Saros is the more proven goaltender.
Mm-hmm.
So like if you're looking at a goaltender, those are the 2. Jacob Markstrom.
Don't you want proven? Like, aren't you?
Yeah, I would like proven. I would really like proven. It's
like we haven't had a proven goalie in Toronto since Belfour. Like, Freddie worked out. Freddie was good, but he wasn't proven when he came. He was a backup when he got here.
Yeah, he was like a tandem goaltender with.
Yeah, like exactly. He was kind of like Gustafson, right? Like that they're very kind of similar people, similar career trajectories. So I'm ready to go and get a Markstrom or a Saros, even Ullmark. It's like he's had 2 really good years, and actually he had 2 really good years in Boston. The first year wasn't so great, but he's now had 2 really good years in Boston, but in a tandem. So, like, is he going to be a bona fide number 1? Can he play 60 games? I don't know. But I know Markstrom and Saros can. So, like, those 2 are probably would be the 2 guys at the top of my list in terms of the guys on Seravalli's trade bait board. And then probably, like, Ullmark, Gustafson, Elvis has left the building. No, thank you. I'm good.
Elvis should leave the NHL, unfortunately, with the way that he is played, but he is not going to.
No. Well, yeah, that's not someone I want here.
Good luck to you, Don Waddell, in figuring that one out.
Don Waddell. Oh, yeah, that's right. Don Waddell took on. That was kind of weird, no? I don't know if we talked about that, but Don Waddell just randomly up and saying peace to a very successful Carolina Hurricanes franchise to go to Columbus. He essentially pulled a Goudreau. This is what we call a Goudreau in the NHL business. When you leave a successful team and go to Columbus, pulling a Goudreau. It's in the dictionary.
Something tells me maybe the ownership situation in Carolina might have had something to do with that one.
I believe a pay increase was involved in the new gig. So I also think that probably had something to do with it. Really quickly too, actually, before we kind of take off, um, I saw a couple of comments yesterday, just since we were back on the goalie discussion for a second. I saw a couple of comments on yesterday's show saying that the Maple Leafs should offer sheet Jeremy Swayman, which I thought about it. I said, actually, that wouldn't be a terrible idea. Like if you offer sheet Swayman, in the even if you give him like a stupid contract that one of two things, either Boston is forced to agree to, and you could screw up their cap, or you get a bona fide, a really good goaltender at and maybe a little bit higher than you want, but you're getting Jeremy Swayman. So let's say you offer sheet him at 7x7. Let's just throw that number out there, right? 7 years, 7 million. I mean, it's a little high for like a tandem goaltender in Swayman, but I think he's a guy who could blossom into one of those 60 game guys. But regardless, worst case scenario, he signs in Boston, and you've now forced Boston to spend $7 million on one of their goaltenders. Best case scenario, you get Swayman as your goalie of the future. You now have Swayman and Woll as your 1-2, and you'd be set with that. Here's the problem, Dave. I went and did some digging. It's not possible. They don't have the requisite draft picks to pull off not only like that cap structured, that compensation style of offer sheet. They can't make any type of offer sheet to anyone because they don't have a first, a second, or a third next year. So there is no offer sheeting anyone at any price for the Maple Leafs this summer unless they somehow reacquired all of their draft picks. So for those who are thinking,
there are, if you go to Cap Friendly, there are two scenarios where the Leafs can make offer sheets. Would you like to hear them? You can offer a player between
less than like $2 million, like where there's no compensation.
1.4 million. There's no compensation required for that.
Oh, or 4 draft picks in the next 5 years.
Yeah, or you offer them over $10 million. So I'm just protecting you, Mike, in case somebody's like, oh, there are scenarios. If the Leafs were to offer sheet anybody for over $10 million, we would have another problem.
Yeah.
We've got already so many guys making over 10 sheets. We don't need to go and not only offer somebody over $10 million, but also do it with 4 first-round picks attached to that. But all the other scenarios,
could you imagine?
But all the other scenarios, the Leafs, as you said, cannot do because they don't have the picks. And it reminds me of the time where the Leafs had to get draft picks back because they were planning. I think the story was they were planning to offer sheet for Phil Kessel or something like that, or they needed to get their picks back. And Brian Burke, the genius that he is, had to make quite a few moves in order to get those picks. He also traded 2 first-round picks for Phil Kessel, if we want to revisit that whole idea. But essentially, essentially, you got, like, I think we've never really seen a lot of offer sheets in the NHL. I mean, even offer sheets that go through till the end. I think the last time a player signed an offer sheet was Aho when he did the Montreal Canadiens offer sheet.
Not Aho.
Who was it?
Kotkaniemi, right? The next year they offered.
Oh yeah, the year after that, Carolina did the swindle.
In response, wow, they got screwed because Kotkaniemi, that was not a worthwhile deal. Yeah, he's not a very good player, and then they ended up having to sign him long term, and that did not work out well for them. I mean, they got Aho at a decent price. But in terms of, when they offer sheet to Kotkaniemi, that did not work out. But that was like straight up Carolina just saying, hey, you tried to screw us last year. How do you like this? We're going to offer sheet your former 3rd overall pick. See how you like it. And Montreal basically was like, sure, go ahead. We'll take the 1st round pick for a guy who we clearly don't think is going to be that good. Didn't turn out to be that good. Yeah, that blew up in their face. But yeah, I don't know. We never see offer sheets, and it bugs me because it's a part of the game, and I think that, like, for example, if you wanted to sign Swayman, do you have the offer sheet compensation page open still?
I can get that
Because,
in 2 seconds.
like, instead of trading multiple picks and prospects for like a youngish player, like a 24, 25-year-old player, so like an RFA aged guy, like let's say Jeremy Swayman, like if you're to trade for Swayman, it would cost you probably more than it would if you were to do an offer sheet. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. So any offer sheet, keep scrolling. So so something in this range, I guess, either a first and a third or a first, second, and a third, basically gives you from 4.2 all the way to like 8.5 million, right? So let's even say maybe you try and sign Swayman to a 6x6 contract or 6 times 6.4, and then it's just a first and a third round pick. I don't think you could even trade. Like if you tried to trade for Swayman, it's going to cost you more than a first and a third round pick. So why don't teams do it more often? Like, it's probably gonna cost you a top prospect, a first round pick, and maybe even, like, additional things, whereas you can just straight up offer sheet someone, and worst case scenario, they're saddled with that cap space, and it maybe not have been what the team wanted to do. Best case scenario, you get a really good player for a cheaper outcome. I don't get it. I don't know why they don't do it.
Yeah, and like especially going after a player that's on a rival team.
Yeah.
Like they used to do that all the time back then. Brendan Shanahan was a part of an offer sheet, right? Years ago.
Pre-cap, pre-salary cap.
Yeah, I understand like this. Yeah, obviously the salary, but like that's the weapon, right? Like take advantage of a team that doesn't have like the cap space to do that stuff.
Especially Toronto, because you look at and this is kind of coming back to bite them in the ass, the signing bonus stuff with what's going on with Tavares. But like Toronto's a team where they can make it bonus laden, and that was what Montreal tried to do, where they essentially like loaded up that first year and gave him a fat signing bonus to Sebastian Aho, and basically dared Carolina to pay that much money on one day, stroke that check. And they didn't think that Carolina was willing to do it. They didn't think that Tom Dutton was willing to do it. And obviously he was, and he did, he wrote the check, and the rest is history. But that's something that Toronto could certainly use to their advantage. The fact that they don't mind giving up signing bonuses, and some teams don't like to do the signing bonus. So if you identify the teams that don't like to do it, the teams that are have more of an internal cap, you might be more likely to have a successful offer sheet on those teams than you would on, if a team like Toronto, who doesn't matter, who doesn't care, or New York or Detroit or any of those teams who, don't have an internal cap situation. There's some food for thought.
Well, we literally had a documentary come out about saving Sakic, because the Rangers were like, we're gonna throw big money at Joe Sakic, and Denver's like, or Colorado times like, we need to find a way to make enough money to keep Joe Sakic. They did but like again, it's you gotta when we hear so much about like doing what it takes to win, go and do the things that it takes to win.
Yeah,
offer sheets are a part of it, and I commend GMs that do it, because it's like,
we've had one GM basically do it,
yeah,
and then the other GM like hit him back essentially and was like, "Oh, you're gonna offer sheet me? I'm gonna offer sheet you." It was like, come on, everyone knew that was a petty offer sheet, and they blew up in his face. Good thing. I'm waiting for Vegas to do an offer sheet. If Vegas is going,
I want Utah. Utah seems like also.
Yeah.
Funny thing is, when I was looking at the offer sheet compensation page, there was an NHL logo. I'm like, oh yeah, Utah. They don't have a logo.
Ooh. Well, speaking of, actually, there's a little bit of an update on the Utah nickname. I was watching the Pat McAfee show. I think I watched like 20 minutes of the Pat McAfee show today, and it happened to be a segment where they were hanging out with the Stanley Cup. They had the Stanley Cup in their building, actually, and they're hanging out with Lordo, and then randomly, impromptu, Pat McAfee just like calls up Ryan Smith, the new owner of the Utah hockey team, just FaceTimes him. He's like, hey, look what I'm standing next to. Wish you could stand next to one of these bad boys. You're going to get one of these one day. You can't even touch it yet. Now you're in the club. You got to win this to touch this. He's just kind of tempting him. But then he asked, like, hey, where are we at with the nickname? And Ryan Smith actually came out and said they're down to their final 4 names and specifically mentioned the Yeti and the Mammoth as the front runners. So we're getting close to them naming a team or having a nickname for a team. So the Yeti and the Mammoth, 2 of the 4 front runners that they're considering right now. What do you think of those names? I like them.
I've always been a big Yeti, but Mammoth
Yetis.
at first. Yeah, like at first the Mammoth wasn't something I was too intrigued with, and then I'm like, that's pretty cool, right?
Yeah. I mean, the Utah Yetis has that like alliteration that I always love, so I'd be a fan if that's what they decided to do. But we'll see. We'll see what ends up happening there. I think the first year they're just being the Utah Hockey Club, I believe.
Yeah, then because they don't have enough time to do the licensing and get the stuff you need for all that. So
yeah.
So it doesn't happen overnight, ladies and gentlemen. Just so you know, it takes a little time for that stuff to go through.
Well, yes, exactly. But that should not preclude you from starting, which is why the Utah Hockey Club, they're like, hey, we'll just get going. We'll just get going. We'll play in some, probably just like a regular blue sweater with a U on it, and we'll just get going for the year. And then next year we'll go all in, and we'll figure things out. Really quickly, Oilers beat the Stars, tie the series at 2 to heading back to Dallas. Rangers Panthers game 5 tonight in New York. That one's sitting at 2 games apiece. Give me a prediction. Rangers or Panthers tonight. Who wins it?
I'm gonna go Rangers. I think a bit of a wake up call with this one. Some of their top players haven't been performing, and they need to start getting their act in gear.
Dude, I think Kreider and Zibanejad have both been held scoreless this entire series. That
Not
can't
good.
remain.
Nope.
Aaron's got to get going. Laffy's been killing it. He's been crushing it. So
he's been saving their bacon, and Shesterkin's been saving their bacon. But they can't. Like the reason why the Panthers are the last 2 games they were so good because their top guys are leading the charge.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll probably come back and tomorrow and we will finalize or recap the Rangers-Panthers game. So we'll go a bit more in depth and detail into that. There's a lot more like leafy news to get into today than the rest of the Stanley Cup playoffs, which we don't get too often these days. So I'm glad we're able to kind of hammer in on some of the Leafs news today. Tomorrow we'll go a little bit more around the league and update what's going on in the playoffs. But that'll do it for us here today on the podcast. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on X at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morassutti and follow the show as well at Locked On Leafs. We'll be back another episode for you guys tomorrow. But until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.